Story 1. When I was growing up, my mom would get very anxious every year around Halloween. It started with the news stories that always seemed to roll out October 1st. Local police on the local news solemnly warning parents to check every piece of candy their children got, to be on the lookout for razor blades in apples and powdered bleach in the Pop Rocks. As if these were the things that killed kids and not guns or cars or poverty. But my mother was the sort of person who was looking for a reason to be afraid. She didn't like us riding our bikes past the end of the street because she was afraid a stranger might come along. At night she would check every door and window twice and then check every closet in the house. Twice she called the police on the guy from the telephone company because he was hanging around the telephone pole in our back laneway. And so October always came as a kind of relief to her because it came as an excuse to let her worst fears run rampant, because the local police and the local news were telling her, "You're right, it's scary, it's dangerous, so be afraid." I say always, but I think I just remember those last few years of childhood when she'd gotten really bad. Dad says it started small, got worse as she became more religious. The year I was 9 we got back from trick-or-treating and my mom was sitting on the couch, her eyes red, and with red streaks all down her face, and it was clear she'd been crying from the moment we left. She made me and my sister put down our bags, and we weren't allowed to have any candy until she'd gone through each and every piece. She took so long with each one, checking the wrappers under a bright light and Grandma's crossword magnifying glass, that she wasn't done until hours after we'd gone to bed enraged. Must have been 3 in the morning. When we woke the next day, half our candy was in the garbage because it hadn't passed muster. I pulled a lot of mine out, and when Mom found out she screamed at me and cried and tried to ground me. Afterward my dad had a talk with her, and I wasn't grounded, but he apologized and threw the candy back in the garbage. He promised to buy me more, and he did, but bought candy just isn't the same as trick-or-treated. For a kid. The year I was 10, things came to a head. Mom didn't want us to go out trick-or-treating at all. She had seen it in the news. Satanists were drugging children through the candy. My dad sent us outside to play, but we could hear them arguing inside. Her voice raised, her tears, and the low calm rumble of his voice slowly rising to match hers. They fought for 3 hours. My sister and I just sitting out back on a pile of old bricks, wearing our Halloween costumes as the day faded. My sister quietly crying as she told me every few minutes, "We're missing Halloween." At last the back door slammed and my father stormed out. He had a red mark on his cheek, and his jaw clenched. When he saw the two of us sitting there his eyes filled with angry tears and he flung out both his arms toward us and said, "Come on kids, we're going trick-or-treating." We each held his hand and he walked us around the house, and when we got out front my mom was standing at the door shouting, "What are you doing? Frank, you're going to get them killed." He told her very calmly, "I'm taking the kids trick-or-treating, Linda." At that she ran out of the house after us, reaching for my sister and I, but we both hid behind our dad, and he put out his arms protectively to either side. "You don't want to stay?" She howled at us. "You don't want to stay with Mommy?" But we were both so afraid of her red face and her wide, wild, shining eyes that we just shook our heads and clung to Dad's jacket. At this she shrank to the pavement. "You don't love me," she told us. "You don't love me. You don't know what you're doing. You don't know what you're doing." Dad just put his arms around us and steered us away. "We'll be back at 8, he said. When we were down at the end of the block he told us, "I'm sorry about your mother, kids. She's going through a really tough time right now, and I don't know how to help her." "Is she going to be okay?" my sister asked. He put his arm around her and said, "Yes, honey. It's all going to be okay." She believed him. She was just a little kid. But I was just old enough to realize from the way he said it that he was trying to convince himself as much as us. Fuck. Well, it was Halloween and we were still kids, and before long we were having fun running up to the houses and being as cute as we could, and being as scary as we could, and being as silly as we could, and each time we ran back down to the sidewalk, our dad would be standing there with a big sad smile to tell us how great we were doing. By the end of the night, we each had a full pillowcase, and my sister was half asleep being carried in the crook of my dad's arm. We got home after dark, and I was afraid that Mom would still be lying on the pavement crying out front, but she had gone to her room and didn't come out to bother us. Even as we sat on the living room floor and counted all out spoils, and Dad told us, "You can have 2 pieces, then it's bed." But when I went to bed, I couldn't really sleep. All I could see when I closed my eyes were the red tear streaks running down Mom's face, the bright black rings of her tear-clogged eyelashes, the terror blazing in her wide eyes. I pulled the covers up over my head and I cried for a long, long time. Eventually you run out of tears. That blessed, numb calm came over me, and I lay there for a while, just watching the patterns of the popcorn ceiling. After a while, I still hadn't fallen asleep, and I decided I was hungry. All those tears had left me hollow, and now I wanted to fill myself with something sweet, something that when I ate it would remind me of the feeling of happiness. Well, I had Halloween candy just out in the living room, so I got up quietly, crept to the door, opened it as softly as I could, then padded down the carpeted hall toward the living room. I could see faintly by the moonlight which drained down the skylight above the couch. There was a faint rustle in the living room ahead. Of course, my first childish thought was that a burglar had come to steal our candy. But as I slowed and peeked around the corner, what I found was the dark mass of my mother, piled up in her blankets on the couch. Her hair was wild, and she wasn't crying anymore, but her shoulders were shaking with little suppressed sobs. And yet, despite her trembling breaths, she was intent as she hunched over something in her hands, and her movements were purposeful, deliberate. My sister's trick-or-treat bag was on the coffee table. There were a few full-sized bars we'd gotten from the rich house down the street. My mother had carefully unwrapped one of them, keeping her fingers cold with a bowl of ice water and a kitchen towel on the couch cushion beside her. She was fiddling with the chocolate bar. I wasn't sure what she was doing until something in her fingers caught the dim moonlight from above. A razor blade. I watched, in stunned silence and confusion, as she slowly worked the blade into soft chocolate and nougat until it was mostly hidden. Then, carefully, she closed the wrapper up, using a dab from a glue stick to almost make it look as though the mylar had never been opened at all. After that, she drew a new razor from the pack and reached for my bag of candy. I took a trembling half-step forward. I said, "Mom," and I'll never forget the brightness of her eyes in the dark. Everyone knows the horror stories. Razor blades, hallucinogens, rat poison, all disguised in candy just waiting for innocent kids to gobble them up. It's all nonsense, of course. Sure, there are a few isolated incidents where some sicko does something like that, but the whole tainted candy myth is an enormous exaggeration at best. No, the reason I say you should check your kids' candy is very, very different. It was the Halloween of '09. I was only 14. I was on the cusp of being ever so slightly too old for it to be socially acceptable to go trick-or-treating, so I aimed to make that night the biggest haul yet. My costume was elaborate. A zombie with a full face mask, claw gloves, and a chest piece that would drip fake blood at the push of a button. I'd learned from experience that the more detailed the costume, the more candy you get. I was going to hit every house that I could. I expected to get so much that I even brought one of those big black garbage bags to hold the candy in. I was going to make it a night to remember. It was, but not for the reasons I had hoped. I couldn't tell you which house I got it from. That's something that has always bugged me. My bag was so full and I'd visited so many houses that it was all just a blur. At the end of the night, I was sorting my candy into piles. A small mound of chocolate bars, some plastic-wrapped gummy candies, dozens of lollipops, and more. As I reached into the central pile of unsorted candy, I found something unusual. It looked like a chocolate bar of some sort, but one I'd never seen before. The wrapper was a greenish-yellow in coloration, with a two-armed cartoon worm giving a thumbs up and winking. The label was in some other language, the symbols not corresponding to any Latin letters that I recognized. At first I thought it was maybe in Russian, but the script wasn't quite right. I'd seen what Cyrillic characters looked like from some video games and movies, and this looked a bit different. Raising an eyebrow, I opened the wrapper, curious to see what was inside. It looked like my initial guess was right. It did seem to be a chocolate bar of some sort, with little white orbs embedded in its surface, kind of like how some candies had pieces of nuts. I gave it a bite, and was pleasantly surprised to find it was utterly delicious. To this day, I think that it was the best chocolate I've ever had in my entire life. Being a 14-year-old, I didn't have the best impulse control. I gobbled the whole thing down in about 30 seconds, tossing the wrapper aside and searching for more in the pile of unsorted candy. I didn't find any more though, and resigned myself to disappointment. I figured I'd ask around at school, bringing the wrapper to see if anyone else had gotten lucky. Maybe I could offer some of my less enticing candy as a trade. After finishing my sorting and eating a few more pieces of candy, I finally headed off to sleep, my stomach full and my heart happy. It had been a great day. The next morning I made sure to pack the empty chocolate wrapper so I could ask around at school, and brought some extra candy for trade. During recess and lunch I asked nearly the whole school about the chocolate, but I only found 3 other people who got one, and like me they had immediately eaten the whole thing. I still remember their names. Jeremy, a lanky, bespectacled kid from my chemistry class, Ashley, a girl with dyed blue hair who I'd seen around but never really talked to, and Lee, a track and field athlete who I shared math class with. They all agreed that it was by far the best chocolate they'd ever had, and had also been hoping to find some more. However, it seemed like the trail ended there. None of them remembered which house gave them the chocolate bar either. I was a little sad, but ultimately it wasn't the end of the world for me. It was just some candy after all. It took a few weeks for me to notice anything strange. I had long since forgotten about the candy bar, and now that Halloween had come and gone, it was back to the daily routine of school and homework. One morning I woke up to find myself feeling very thirsty. It felt like I had been walking in the desert for days, so I immediately got up to get something to drink. Normally with breakfast I would have milk or orange juice, but that day I decided I would just have a big glass of water. And then another, and another. After 3 glasses I was finally satisfied. My mom eyed me with confusion. "Feeling a bit dehydrated, honey?" she asked. I nodded, a little embarrassed. "I'm not sure why. I just felt really thirsty this morning," I responded. She smiled and said smugly, "Well, at least it's not soda or energy drinks. Those things will rot your teeth, you know." I rolled my eyes and finished my breakfast, getting ready for school, bringing 2 bottles of water with me. That day during chemistry class, our teacher announced that Friday there would be a school-day-long field trip to the local lake, where a fish and wildlife representative would talk about the native ecosystem and the environmental impact of pollution. It wasn't mandatory, but students who went and wrote a paper about it would get extra credit. The teacher said that anyone who wanted to go should raise their hand, and instantly I found myself lifting mine. Jeremy did too, and I detected the faintest hint of confusion on his face. I also felt a little bewildered. I'd never really been particularly interested in environmentalism or anything like that, and it's not like I needed the extra credit. But something about the field trip seemed to call to me, like I was meant to go there. The rest of the week passed agonizingly slow. I found myself constantly thinking about the lake, about its cool green waters rippling gently in the breeze. Every morning I would wake up thirstier than the last, until my mom was starting to grow concerned about my water intake. I bought one of those huge water bottles that athletes use, and I noticed that Jeremy and Ashley had as well. Lee already had one, but I noticed him drinking from it more often than normal in math class. Finally, Friday came around and the small number of students going to the lake got into the school bus. I couldn't help but notice Lee and Ashley were coming too, but I was quickly distracted by the thought of the lake. I'd never been one for water. It was fun to go to the pool once in a while. Sure, but I'd never been obsessed over it. However, all I could think of during the bus ride to the lake was how good it would feel to just dive into its shimmering water, to sink all the way to the bottom and stay there, surrounded by fish. When we finally arrived, the fish and wildlife guy had us all sit down on the grass. He told us about pH levels, showed us a preserved frog with too many legs, and passed around photos of some of the garbage he had found on the water's edge. I wasn't paying attention, though. I was just staring out at the lake, hypnotized by its gentle waves. I thought about how nice it would feel on my skin, in my mouth. Before I knew what I was doing, I was standing up, walking towards the lake. I could faintly hear the chaperone yelling at me to come back, and some of the other students murmuring in confusion, but I wasn't focused on that. It was just background noise. The sounds of the lake filled my ears. I was vaguely aware that I wasn't alone in my march towards the lake. Jeremy, Ashley, and Lee were all walking with me, similarly fixated. I felt my tennis shoes sink into the cold water as we kept walking onward. As I kept moving, the water went up to my knees, then my thighs, my waist, my chest, my neck. Finally, my head was fully submerged, and I looked out into the murky gloom, not even trying to hold my breath as I inhaled the lake water. Then came the sudden realization of what was happening, where I was. It was as if I had been a puppet whose strings were suddenly cut. I was fully aware of the fact I was drowning. Then came the pain. I could feel wriggling under my skin, a burning, itching pain like needles shooting up from inside my flesh. I looked down and saw long pallid worms erupt from out of my skin like moles digging out of the earth. I tried to scream, my mouth once again flooding with water as one of them squirmed out from underneath my eyelid. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all came writhing up as they burrowed through my flesh. The pain was unbearable, and my vision started to fade to black as I passed out from a combination of agony, terror, and lack of oxygen. I woke up in the hospital, my parents standing over me, their eyes filled with concern. I felt so tired, but thankfully not thirsty at all. When they realized I was awake, my mom smothered me with hugs and kisses, while my dad just started sobbing with relief. I asked about the others, the 3 students who went into lake with me, but they didn't make it. There was only time to rescue one of us. The doctors were at a loss to explain the puncture wounds all over my body, but said that it wasn't anything too severe, and that I should be able to recover with some pain medicine and antibiotics. I didn't tell them about the worms. I knew I wouldn't be believed anyway, and I didn't want to end up locked away in some institution. I already had to have therapy sessions and got put on some antidepressants. Apparently the authorities cooked up some story about a suicide pact between Jeremy, Ashley, Lee, and I. I played along with this story to the therapist, talking about feeling overwhelmed at school and whatnot, but it was all nonsense. I wasn't depressed, at least not before this happened. I did some independent research trying to figure out what happened to me. What I found was startling. There is a phylum of worm called Nematomorpha, also known as horsehair worms. They typically infect insects, growing inside them and controlling their central nervous system to make them jump into water and drown. Once the host leaps into the water, the worm burrows its way out of the host, continuing its life aquatically to find a mate and lay eggs. There are a few cases of accidental infection of humans, but there is no recorded evidence of them ever manipulating a mammal the same way they control insects. I also found something else out. A few weeks after Halloween, every year, like clockwork, there is a spike in child deaths due to drowning. It's not enough to be noticed by most people, but it is obvious once you're looking for it. So I'll say to you again, Always check your kids' Halloween candy. If you find a greenish-yellow chocolate bar with writing in a language you've never seen before, don't let them eat it, no matter what. Story 3. Isn't it ironic that we have taught ourselves to trust no one, to lock the doors, to double-check that everything is safe, to always look who is outside ringing the bell? It is, after all, necessary. Crime rates going high, burglaries more often than ever before, and violence all around us. Yet, on a special night a year at the end of October, we allow everyone in, sometimes without ever seeing their face, and we generously open the door for all kinds of trick-or-treaters. I used to do that too, but today, I have decided to tell you why I stopped feeling happy for Halloween. It was 3 years ago. I do like to say that I am still young and energetic, but as much as I loved the Halloween tradition, trick-or-treating even then was far behind my age demographic, although let's be honest. I would kill to get to dive headfirst in a bucket of Halloween candy. But that's the good thing with Halloween, right? You can have fun no matter what the age. Although, of course, it's just a little bit different from what you experienced as a kid. The sweets are replaced with alcohol, and the fun involves getting drunk with people and flirting with sexy cats, nurses, librarians, or whatever is your secret fantasy. What a time, really. It so happened that my group of friends and I decided that I would be this host of the adult Halloween party that year. I live at a typical suburban house. A nice garden in front, facing the street, a small backyard on the other side, my not always perfectly clean kitchen next to the front door, and a cozy living room, with a staircase leading to the bathroom and 2 bedrooms. For the party, I did my best to organize everything as good as I could, and I tried to do some DIY decorations with pumpkins candles next to the stuff that I got from the store to set the mood. We believed that we should have as many people as possible. A crowded party is a happy party. The deal was that all my initial guests could invite anyone they wanted, provided they would bring some alcohol themselves, because I really couldn't afford getting that many people drunk. As the first people started arriving, I was greeting everyone. I pretty much knew most of them since they were neighbors or assistants of colleagues or sometimes old schoolmates I had kind of lost contact with. A little bit on the uncomfortable side at first, but thankfully, I had done a pretty good job on making the fruit punch, and as it got mixed with other drinks, it made everyone much more content and ready to have fun. Of course, I had prepared a large pumpkin-shaped bowl to give something to the children coming for trick-or-treating. The bowl was filled mostly with Mars, Bounty, and Snickers chocolates, my favorites, in hopes to save some for my greedy self next day. In my mind, it doesn't count as bad for you if you are willing to offer it, but you get leftovers. The party was progressing nice. People seemed happy, and there were lots of dancing and laughing, and some new acquaintances as well. I had already given a key to one of the bedrooms to my friend Daniel, who seemed to be getting very intimate with a very lightly dressed policewoman. I didn't know the girl, but I was happy that my guy was getting some action. Really, the only one who was distressed with the whole ordeal was Beatrice, my cat, who was really trying to find some peace and quiet and avoided contact with my guests as best as she could. This is where I kinda lost the ball. At first I was nervous about whether my guests would enjoy the party, but seeing everyone having a great time, I finally relaxed and was able to enjoy some rum, and then some beer, and more rum. Also, I got my hands on some exotic tequila somebody had brought. I wasn't too drunk, but definitely very tipsy. More than should be allowed for a party host at least. I was still greeting any latecomers to the party, but it was getting so hard to actually understand who they were through the dizzyings. Even if I did hear their names, I would do a surprised, "Ah yeah," and then resume with dancing and having fun with friends. Meanwhile, many trick-or-treaters had come by, and I did my best to help all of them to some of my candy, carefully trying to give them as less Snickers as possible without them noticing. I was so pleased to have so many left, by the time the last group finished its visit at my porch. The time was about 1 a.m., and I can say that by this time pretty much everyone was super drunk. I tried to keep myself in a semi-functional state, but I barely succeeded. And then the doorbell rang once more. It was another group of trick-or-treaters. A ghost, a skeleton, a kid dressed like the Headless Horseman with a pumpkin on its head and a mummy. I was shocked that they came so late at night, but I really wasn't in the mood to occupy my last brain cells with that, so I just welcomed them as sober-looking as I could. Trick or treat! I heard a 4 children chorus yell. The way they said it sounded strange, like the voices were all coming from one spot. "Hello, kids?" I said, trying to sound excited. Although, come to think about it, it sounded more like a groan. It has to be treat, I guess. But what are you doing at this time in my house? Your parents should be worried sick. I asked, genuinely concerned. After a small delay, I heard a girl's voice coming from underneath the sheet she used as a costume for the ghost. "We know it is late, but we were playing video games in my house and started visiting people a little late. Our parents are fine with it, really. But we have almost no candy because nobody opens the doors so late." I kind of felt bad when I heard that. Kids without candy on Halloween is a very sad idea. But still, it seemed something was off. The voice sounded so emotionless and echoed so strange. Not the way you'd expect for a child excited for candy. But whatever, I was too drunk to care that much. "Okay then," I replied. "So what's your favorite candy?" Again a small delay. "Kit Kat," said the same girl. "Do you have some of that?" I had indeed bought some, but when I checked my bowl, I realized that I had given it all to the other trick-or-treaters that came early. "Okay, I am all out of Kit Kats. I only have some Snickers, some Bounty and Mars, so you have to choose wisely," I said, laughing. This time the delay was bigger. When I got the answer, it was the same voice, but it sounded so cracked and nervous all of a sudden. It was like the kid I was speaking to suddenly got very frightened. "We'll take the Snickers, sir, thank you." Damn, I wish they had picked one of the others, but it was too late to go back now. I gave the ghost-costumed girl most of my beloved Snickers candies, and she clumsily got them, with her hands still under the sheet. "Thank you, you are awesome. Good night." I heard a cacophony of 4 voices shout, and then they all run away. From the distance, I heard a small thump from something falling on the grass. I thought of going back there to try to reach them and give whatever they dropped back. But I just couldn't help myself to. This situation was still very bizarre, though. I told myself that I had enough drinks for the night and that I needed to sober up. While I was walking back home, the party was going on like nothing ever happened. Some broken glass was on the floor, and I cursed a little bit at the thought of how much I had to do for next morning. But nonetheless, I went back into entertaining my guests and having a good time myself. Then I noticed a person I hadn't seen before, or I think he noticed me first. He or she had a full goat costume, albeit a very creepy one. It was of gray color and the belly was white. The entire body was covered, apart from the running shoes at the bottom. Even the hands looked like goat legs. But the head was the real deal. It looked almost real. The horns were 2 spires of black, twisting upwards. And the eyes, the yellowish eyes, made me feel so uneasy. They looked like they came straight from a pagan ritual. Needless to say, I was very concerned. I am pretty sure that even if I had gotten myself smashed, I wouldn't have missed such a creepy disguise coming in the house. But I don't remember opening for this person. He or she, or whatever it was, must have gotten in from the backyard door while I was speaking with the strange trick-or-treaters. My best guess was that somebody who was too drunk to access the situation had opened the door without checking. The mysterious figure saw me and approached me. Then, without saying a word, started to dance with me. Not a real dance, but more of a small rhythmical movement, followed by some awkward turnings of the head. It held a martini glass with a colorless liquid inside. Vodka, I guessed. "Who are you, man?" I yelled amidst the party noises. The masked guest didn't say a thing. "Who opened the door for you?" Still no answer. The goat extended its martini glass toward me, almost pushing it to my face. I almost indulged in drinking it. Then I remembered my last decision. I promised to remain as sober as possible for the rest of the night. "No thanks, mate. I am good, but can you please tell me, who are you?" "Nothing." The mysterious guest just persisted in dancing with me and offering me to drink from the glass at times, and pointing at it, with that creepy-looking goat fur-covered hand. I was beginning to get too tired of these antics, so I started entertaining the idea of taking the drink just to finish that person's pressure and find some peace and quiet. As I extended my hand to get the glass, something happened, which is the sole reason I am here, writing about my experience. A couple of very drunk people tripped over my small dining room table and fell on the uninvited guest. They all managed to stay on their feet, but the shock sent the content of the glass on my wooden floor. Then, out of nowhere, Beatrice made her appearance. The cat started licking the spilled drink. After a few licks, she abandoned it and excused herself under the sofa, where she had been trying to hide for the whole night. I watched her and laughed, but then I realized that the goat person was no longer in front of me. After a quick scan in the room, I saw him. He was standing at the backyard door, and he was slowly waving at me. I got goosebumps as I saw this image because it was so damn creepy. Then, with slow steps and always staring straight at me, he went out and disappeared. The rest of the night is a blur. I barely remember people leaving the house, me double-locking all the doors, and going to bed, creeped out until the moment I fell asleep. The next day, the first thing I noticed going down the stairs was yesterday's mess. Glasses everywhere, some broken, and plates and bottles everywhere. And then I saw Beatrice, lying motionless on the carpet. "Bee!" I said joyfully. "Come here, you little puffball. I am sorry for yesterday. I am going to make you some great fish soup today to compensate." No reaction. That was unusual. She always comes to rub herself on my legs when I call her. As I reached her body, she remained there with no sign of life. Took me a while to realize she was dead. I was devastated. I loved Bee, and she had been my companion for years. I was so curious as to what happened to her, though. I drove her body to the vet, and after a quick examination, she told me that Bee had been poisoned from a very toxic substance. The events of last night started to come back to me, suppressed until then by my hangover. I remembered the strange guest that persisted that I had to drink from his glass, the way Bee drank the spilled content, the strange trick-or-treaters that were the cause of me not checking who entered the house for a while. Frustrated, I arrived back home, still believing that all of this was a terrible prank. While nervously walking on my garden, I came across an object, the one that had fallen from the kids last night. It was a cheap smartphone. When I opened the screen, I saw something that still haunts me. The menu I was presented with had around 8 recordings, and the titles were peculiar. I pressed the first one. It had the title Intro, Trick or Treat, from 4 voices, identical to the ones I had listened to the night before. The other ones were a bunch of similar Halloween-themed pre-recordings, mostly spoken by the voice of the girl in the ghost costume. I pressed the third one called, "Why Are You Out So Late?" We know it is late, but we were playing video games in my house and started visiting people a little late. Our parents are fine with it, really, but we have almost no candy because nobody opens the doors so late. What the fuck? This was identical to the answer I was given when I asked them what the hell were they doing that late outside. Then it hit me. The children were part of this. They were there to keep me out of the house just enough for the intruder to come in. I remember asking them which candy they liked, and of course when I checked the phone, there was a recording saying, "Kit-cat, Dio, you have some of that?" But when I asked which one they wanted from the ones I had, they had no prepared answer. I guess the kid who was the leader had to improvise, and that's why it was so nervous. Probably, they were told what was about to happen, so they had their voices recorded, probably by the uninvited goat freak, to secure that I wouldn't catch their nervousness. In a mix of desperation and fear, I pressed the last recording. Goodbye after getting candy. Thank you, you are awesome. Good night. I was angry and terrified. What kind of freak lets children in on such a plan? And my next thought, all this was for me. I was supposed to be dead now. To be honest, it was the first time I let that thought sink in, and the fear completely paralyzed me. I spent the next months always looking over my shoulder, trying to find out who would go to such an extent to kill me. I was lost in my own stress and fear for a long time. But truth be told, in time everything always gets back to normal. I managed to slowly feel safe once again in time, as I reported my incident to the police, and they assured me they would look into it. Spending time with friends and family also helped a lot. The mind tends to forget these stressful and horrifying experiences, provided that you manage to keep it busy. Of course, I didn't attend any Halloween parties from then on, let alone host one anymore, because that would dig out all of my dread for the events of that fateful night. So I managed to get over my memories, although every Halloween season I would feel a little uneasy. But nothing lasts forever. Nothing good, at least. I had managed to suppress this memory for the last 3 years until today. And this is the reason I am writing all of this. Because, as I walked into my kitchen this morning, I saw a note on the floor, passed inside from underneath the door. It read, "It makes me sad that you don't do Halloween parties anymore. I missed you. But don't worry. This year, whatever you do, I'll be there and we will have a good time. The two of us. I'm gonna get you this time. P.S. Try to guess what costume I will be wearing this year. I bet you are in for a surprise."